Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Well, I want to congratulate myself yet again for getting through an entire show yesterday without mentioning the word TRUMP. I don't know if I'll be so lucky today, but I'm quite sure I'm not going to be. But good heavens. You have to admit, well, no, you don't have to admit anything. Here's the scary part. And I alluded to this, I think, a few days ago. What invariably happens when somebody stakes out a position on the, off to the right or to the left, whatever, but pulls away from the rest of the crowd and, like TRUMP, attracts a whole bunch of people, then the crowd tends to move a little closer to him, even though it looks as though they're distancing themselves. But no, they see, my God, he's talking like this, he's saying these things, and his poll numbers are continuing to go up. He has a solid 35% of likely Republican voters. Okay? So if you're, and Ted Cruz is the one playing this game the most. If you're Ted Cruz and you're a horrible person, but you're smart, you're looking at all of this and you're not distancing yourself as much, and you're sort of sidling over that direction. What ends up happening is that a Ted Cruz, instead of being labeled as a right-wing, conservative, crazy person, now, in relation to that guy, TRUMP, appears moderate. So when the extremes on either end, any side, go maybe a little too far, and the so-called middle of the road moves with them a bit, the idea of what moderate is shifts to the right. And my concern about what Trump is doing is he is pulling this already lunatic right-wing party further. He's pandering and appealing to their base, to a base that they carefully nurtured for the last few decades, to a base that was schooled by talk radio and Fox News, to a base that they made suspicious and or cynical about every institution in this country, about government, and all kinds of adages come to mind. You reap what you sow. But they created this base, this 35%, who they now need in order to have a shot at winning. So if you created these people, the only way you get their vote is to appeal to them. You think you're going to, all of a sudden, after 2 decades of brainwashing by Rush Limbaugh and the whole Fox retinue, you think you're going to, with a few rational speeches, pull them back? No. So while I do not think Donald Trump will be the nominee, I do not. Something's going to happen that'll prevent it, including Donald Trump himself. But I do think whoever is the nominee will look palatable in relation to Donald Trump, will appear reasonable and or rational and or moderate, when in fact they're anything but. You've seen this over the last 40, 50 years. The fact that people now say, Ronald Reagan would never get the nomination of this party. George W. Bush would not get it. He's too friendly to Muslims and to immigrants. This party continues to just pull away and away and away. It's the base they created. As I said, they lovingly nurtured, fed 24 hours a day their propaganda, and they took it in and they believe. And now the party elders got to deal with this monster. Just desserts. But on the other hand, when you see that the British Parliament is about to have to, by virtue of a petition that has enough signatures of citizens of the UK, British Parliament is going to have to actually argue on the floor of the House of Commons whether or not to deny Donald Trump admission to the United Kingdom, based on the fact that he is a spreader of hate. They managed to keep out some certain imams because of the law they have, and they're going to turn it around and perhaps keep Donald Trump out. Do you think people in the world make the distinction that between Donald Trump and the United States of America and what it stands for? I doubt it. And it could be that the America that Donald Trump is representing is in fact very real. We know it. It's very real. The damage that he and the Republican Party have done to our standing in the world, to our sense of who we are, even ourselves, is just mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing to me. I was coming up in the elevator just a few moments ago, and someone said to me, you know, I'm more afraid of Americans now than I am of ISIS. I'm afraid of Americans. And he quoted some poll he heard that said now a majority of American people want to go to war in Syria. They want us to have troops on the ground in Syria. The other possibility that's happening here is that Trump has, in fact, this time gone too far. Gone too far. So you see media now saying some media saying, we are not going to continue to enable him. We are not going to put him on every 5 seconds so he can continue this blather. You have the Republicans. I can't even imagine how furiously and desperately they're trying to figure out a strategy to undercut him. But the reality is, he's got 35% of their voters almost in his pocket. And I think he was saying something the other day, and can't put it past him, of course not. He was saying if he's not treated with the respect he's due as the front runner of the grand old party, well, he just might have to run as an independent. And that's the most terrifying thing of all. Because obviously, if Donald Trump runs as an independent, Hillary Clinton is president of the United States, hands down. Although let me say this, and it hasn't been said enough. In a general election, I think there are a whole bunch of Democrats who would vote for Donald Trump. And those are those are like the Reagan Democrats, people who are registered Democrat, but in fact aren't. Somebody else pointed out, I forget what I was reading, that polls invariably, underreport in a case like this, where Trump is, by establishment standards, considered a joke and or toxic and or whatever. So that if somebody is really loving what he's saying and they're asked, who are you supporting? They don't want to acknowledge that they're supporting Trump. It doesn't seem like the thing you're supposed to say. So they say somebody else. And there's a sense that rather than being inflated by people who will somehow come to their senses down the road, his numbers might actually be undercounted because people unwilling to self-report their ardor for the Donald. All of what I said lead us to one place, and that is we are in the midst of something quite volatile, definitely frightening, has great consequences for not only the Republican Party, but for the United States of America, and that this gargoyle, orangutan-ish buffoon, has the power that he has right now, is why the guy in the elevator said, I'm more afraid of Americans, my fellow Americans. The constant movement to the right of the Republican Party, since I've been paying attention, has been really pretty breathtaking. And rather than pulling back, it just seems to be, in fact, escalating. So that when you look at what was a Republican when Richard Nixon was president, and you look at what Nixon, the legislation he signed, and the things he proposed, he looks like a liberal Democrat. Honest. I'm not even engaging in hyperbole. Richard Nixon, his politics, except for his race baiting, looks remarkably liberal. So, as I told my sister the other day, I'm not laughing about this anymore. I'm not, and I'm pretty... It's a fascinating thing to be watching, but it's a terrifying thing to be watching. We really don't know how this is going to end. We really don't know. Now, the fact that he said he was going to Israel and now he's not going to Israel because even Netanyahu finds Donald Trump's views on Muslims unacceptable. So, he's not going to go to Israel. The Israelis don't want him to visit. The Brits don't want him to visit. The world's trying to marginalize him. But I don't know how much impact the world will have. It's our problem. He's a creation of us, of what we call news, of what we call media, of our politics, of our cynicism, of our lack of education, of our lack of seriousness. Chris Potter once said something, and I'm going to mangle it, but it was just so smart. And he said it maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. 5 years ago, maybe. When things were looking pretty bad, but I don't know if they were looking as bad as they are now. And he said something about that all there was around. I mean, if you look at a Donald Trump, this is, I'm not obviously remembering, but he said what you have is unserious men in an extremely serious time. The people that you look at who are vying to lead us in this historic moment are unserious. And God knows the times are serious. He said it. He said something very, a little bumper sticker. Speaking of bumper stickers, Lori says, "Hi, Lynn. I was sitting on the bus when a car passed with a sticker on it that said, 'I drive like a Cullen.' I laughed." She laughed because she knows that I drive like a Cullen. I drive like a lunatic. And I've seen those too. I haven't seen I Drive Like a Cullen, but I've seen, and yeah, she says Cullen is apparently a character from the Twilight series. Yeah, I've seen some of that too. Yeah. Knowing you were avoiding him yesterday, Roger writes, I'll phrase my question this way. Do you know whose supporters in today's Republican Party... What? No, I think you got this wrong. This doesn't read right. Are you know is what you've written here. Are you know whose supporters in today's Republican Party, what Southern Democrats turned Republican were after passing of the Civil Rights Act in the 60s. Are you know who's what Southern Democrats? That got mangled somehow, and I'm not reading it right. You didn't type it right, and I ain't reading it right. So try that again. Oh my. Can we go to the Supreme Court of the United States? Where yesterday, yet again, the justices listened to arguments about affirmative action at universities. Have you heard what Scalia said? Apparently, there were audible gasps in the Supreme Court chamber. Here's what he said in part. There are some who contend it does not benefit African Americans to get them into the University of Texas, where they do not do well, as opposed to having them go to a less advanced school, a slower track school, where they do well. Gasps. This is a justice of the Supreme Court. He went on to say that he was not convinced that the University of Texas needed more black students. Quote Scalia, maybe it ought to have fewer. I don't think it stands to reason that it's a good thing for the University of Texas to admit as many blacks as possible. Let me give you Chief John Roberts. He was talking about diversity. And he said this: what unique perspective does a minority student bring to a physics class? What we have here is white guys who so don't get it. It's unbelievable. You have Scalia actually arguing for it, because he went into much greater length. He's arguing for segregation. Essentially, he's saying, we don't need those blacks at the University of Texas. We'll put them in another school that's not as rigorous, where they can do okay. So he's arguing for segregation and anything but an equal playing field. And you know what? Justice Kagan, who would be on the pro-affirmative action side, is sitting this one out, has had to recuse herself because as Solicitor General, I guess, of the United States, she had been involved in this case at some other point. So affirmative action, given what we see here, it's finished. It's screwed. Hey, you Republicans, way to go! As usual, well done. It's funny how the Republicans don't like ISIS, because ISIS is about going back. They want to go back to the good old days of 750, when, there was a caliphate and everybody knew their place and this and that, and they ruled the world. The Republicans want to go back to a time of total understanding that this was a Christian nation with white privilege and European background, Anglo-Saxon preferred, in which women were kept under control and blacks kept under control. I mean, they're all they got the same mindset in that regard. They just all want to get back to the good old days. Justice Sotomayor, sitting there trying not to burst into tears, talked about how she was an affirmative action. It's how affirmative action helped her get into Princeton. And she said this from the bench: I fear something. I have a worry that this court is on the verge of shutting down affirmative action at state universities across this nation. She has reason to fear. She knows these guys. She's sitting listening to all of them. Just what I read you from Rob. Now, okay, you got Roberts. Scalia said some wondrous things, too. You got Roberts, you got Scalia, you got Clarence Thomas sitting there listening to this racist babble from Scalia, and he doesn't punch him. He doesn't even say a word. Even that doesn't get a rise out of Thomas, because, in fact, he will be with Scalia on this issue. Mind-blowing. Margie says, I think I'm engaging in wishful thinking that Trump will not get the nomination. Well, I mean, I think either way, I don't think he'll get it, but I do think if he doesn't, he's a third-party candidate. He's the Ross Perot of this election cycle. This happens to the Republicans a lot. You get Ross Perot, and he gave the Democrats the win. And you had George Wallace splintering. He gave Democrats the win. That's how this works. Which is why more and more Republicans really do believe that Trump is doing this because he wants Hillary Clinton to be the president. Oh, dear. Okay, Roger says, okay, he's rephrasing his question to me. Are Trump supporters today what Southern Democrats, who then turned into Republicans, were after passage of the Civil Rights Act in the 60s? Well, it's the same, it's the same crowd. I mean, the demographics, as far as those who are willing to step up and say, I am for Trump, that they're overwhelmingly white. They're overwhelmingly working class, hanging on. They're overwhelmingly not college educated. And that, I guess that's who they are. And they've been taking it on the chin in this country. It's true. Their problem is they don't understand who they're supposed to be mad at, I think. Chuck writes, Jeb Bush is starting to spend money. He's been spending money. He has dropped millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of dollars in this race. Jeb Bush. And you got to wonder what the people who gave him that money are thinking. Because as he has spent money, his poll numbers, he's almost down there with, Huckabee now. This ain't his year. I'll tell you that right now. Okay, back to Chuck. Jeb Bush is starting to spend money, and I saw his first commercial a few times over the weekend. In this commercial, he takes hard jabs at Trump, Rubio, Carson, and Cruz. The commercial's well done. We are now entering the 9-month period of political commercials. Oh, God help us. And so Trump will have to start spending money. The target on his back is huge, and Trump will have to start depending on more than just sound bites to propel himself. When he has to dig into his own pockets, let's see how much he wants it. Okay, but the fact is he hasn't had to dip into his own pockets because he gets all the media he wants all the time. Every place he's going to be and any time he makes an utterance, it gets covered. Why does he have to spend money? Now, if media start thinking we're going to pull back on him because we've helped create this monster, don't hold your breath on that one, though, by the way, because Trump draws a crowd. And there's nothing, obviously, that television wants more than a crowd. It's how they make their money. Commercials ain't going to save Jeb Bush. I mean, and Carson's finished. I would hazard to say that I have said this before, that it's Rubio and Cruz. And I used to say it was more Rubio, but now Cruz. He is positioning himself very, very well to take Trump's people if things play out that way. Who knows? Oy. Speaking of the middle class, the middle class shrinks. That's a headline here. Well, we knew that. Guess how middle class is defined, you know? Some people might be startled. Middle class in this country, and I'm not sure who's making this definition, middle class is defined as an annual income of $42,000 $128,000 to $126,000 for a family of 3. You thought somebody making 6 figures was rich? That'll tell you something. The nation's middle class has shrunk to the point where it is no longer constitutes the majority of the adult population. This is according to a major study underwritten by Pew, which is pretty good. Pew Research Center. So for the first time since anybody's been bothering to track this kind of thing, the number of Americans who fall into the middle class is below 50%. It's in the high 40s. But that other 50% is probably about 35%, 30%, they don't tell me here, poor, below 42,000 for a family of 3. That might be 35, 40. And then the other 10 or 15 are rich. And the number of rich people has gone up. The people who are making money off of what kind of capitalism and what kind of an economy we have now, they are getting richer and richer, and they're pulling away. And more people are dropping into the lower levels, and the middle class is, yes, disappearing. We know this. And this is the kind of thing that cannot stand if the United States is to stand. Can't. I got to read that one more time, Scalia.
Some real gems in there.
There are some. He said this in open court. You can just imagine him sitting up there. There are some who contend it does not benefit African Americans to get them into the University of Texas, where they do not do well, as opposed to having them go to a less advanced school, a slower track school, where they do well. God. Mind-blowing. Ansel. Lynn, there's still a small part of me that believes that Trump's run for president is an ego trip. There's a small part of you? Ansel, that's what it is. This is Trump. This is beyond Trump's dreams. This is what Trump has been blowing himself up for his entire life. Trump lives to be the center of attention. I mean, it's his all ego. He doesn't necessarily, I don't know that he even wants to be the president of the United States, which comes with a lot of work that he would find not interesting. Ansel writes, I don't think he wants the presidency as much as he wants the attention. Ansel, you're absolutely right, but it should be more than a small part of you that thinks that. That's it. I continue to think that he'll take the first way out that isn't embarrassing. He will not take a way out until the spotlight goes away. And the spotlight ain't going away. So those of you who think, when he has to spend his own money, he'll leave. I don't think he'll have to spend his own money. And if he has to, he's got some money. And he could probably raise money. Do you know these poor people who think he's the answer? They'll send him money. Okay. What time we got there? Okay. Hey, I had an interesting. I met Sophie Masloff's granddaughter last night. I had so much fun talking to her. She's a lot. She's got a lot of the Sophie spunk. And very, very close to her grandmother. It was a lot of fun talking to her. And I said, God, the stories you must have in your head. And she said, I know. She said, and I got a steel trap memory, so I remember all this stuff. I said, oh, my God, but you got to write it down, or you got to do an oral something with somebody. Because, man, she was a wondrous, wondrous character, an unlikely character, a delightful character. And her granddaughter was saying, I think there should be a statue of her. I said, I do too. And the granddaughter said, but I don't know how to. I said, well, you shouldn't have to. That has to be something that the people would, or a foundation would get behind, because it would take a lot of money. And I said to her, where would you want her statue, if there was one? And she couldn't think of a place. And then I had an idea. Put her statue. There's a lot of other statues over there, but put her statue right near PNC Park. Put her statue there. Okay, what we got here? Okay, Scalia, here's an email. Scalia actually said that out loud? Wow. I think he needs to go to a slower court. A less rigorous court. She says, like maybe a tennis court. Or a food court. Let's here is an attorney's quote. Comments like that would put any other judge in hot water. I am now seriously concerned for the mental health of Scalia. I have said this. I don't think he's quite right. He's gotten more and more so, and more things coming out of his mouth that are, to say the least, not judicious, but also, just so intemperate, where he's insulted other justices, even in his right. I do think he's lost it. But there's no way to get him off. Anyway, this attorney says judges in command of their faculties don't make such comments publicly, let alone from the bench, even if they're thinking them. The question now becomes, how bad does his behavior have to get before someone starts saying, impeachment? It has to get worse than that. It's plenty bad, but it does have to get much worse. Can you imagine how African Americans feel about reading that quote and realizing that this is a guy with extraordinary powers who sits on the highest court in this land? And that's what he thinks of you. Reminder that tomorrow we'll be joined via phone by Jean Marie Laskus, the writer whose story I'm trying to come up with a football metaphor. It's not happening fast enough. God dang it. Who, tackled the NFL. That's not it. Anyway, Jean Marie will join us. Her movie, well, the article has now begotten a movie, filmed here in Pittsburgh, dealing with Pittsburgh people, and getting a lot of buzz, as they say. It's opening Christmas Day. It's called Concussion. Jean Marie has taken the article that gave rise to it, which was essentially a profile of Dr. Bennett Omalu, who was working as a pathologist in the Allegheny County morgue when he dissected Mike Webster's brain, and then one thing led to another. We've got a call. Hello?
Hey, Lynn, it's Mike from D.C.
Hi, Mike.
You mean University of Texas at Austin isn't an inferior school?
I doubt that it is, actually. I think the University of Texas is considered a very good school.
Compared to Yale and Harvard and where all the other chief justices went.
Yeah.
And that's probably what's going to happen. This case is going to win, and schools in the north and west will continue to incorporate and get minority students into the universities, and all the southern colleges, like Liberty University, won't have any. And then when they go and look for a job, it'll be harder for them.
Well,
because the standards will, when they get a job, it'll be harder for them because they'll have to work around people unlike themselves.
Well, I mean, what this will do is, we are very resegregated in public schools, and this case is about public universities. So, yeah, you could see them segregate again.
Because universities that understand the mission of a university will always do whatever they can to make sure that the population is diverse.
But you see, that's what the University of Texas wanted to do. All it takes is one white student who didn't get in to get in front of the court.
University of Texas said that woman who this case is about would never have gotten in there because her SATs and entrance criteria were so low that she never would have gotten in there, no matter what. So a lot of attorneys and experts in legal matters say, I've read anyway, they say that this case should never have made it because she didn't even meet the base criteria. That all the blacks that got in scored higher than she did. And that the University of Texas, 80% of the people only get in according to their SATs and their grades. The other 20%, they take into other circumstances, like did you have a single-family home, and were you raised in a trailer, and what was your ethnic background, and what school did you go to? That's the only 20% that the court is arguing about. And any good school will continue to try and find ways to make their population
diverse.
Because
they recognize that getting an education is about preparation for dealing with the real world.
And that's what's so insulting about the Chief Justice's comment. What does a minority bring to, what did you say, physics?
Yeah, that quote was stunning to me, given that, he said, and what unique perspective does a minority student bring to a physics class?
Yeah, he or she doesn't, but what they bring to the overall experience of your bigoted white kid at the university is what unique thing they bring to the university. And I've said this before, I think, but The Republicans, first they went after the media and destroyed that. Now, because it's too liberal, right? Then they're going after higher education because it's converting their kids to being liberal.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we'll do is, again, have two types of universities. One where only white kids go, and others, Yale, Harvard, NYC, NYU, every other university will continue to look for ways to integrate their schools. They will. The only question that will ever be on the thing is, can the states force a university to include minorities or to give preferential treatment to minorities? And how insulting is that?
Yeah.
That the only way they would get in is if they were given preferential treatment.
Right. And all that does it. Yeah. That. Well, I mean, ask any African American student in a university or law school who doesn't know that there's white classmates looking at him and thinking, you don't really belong here. You only got in because blah, blah, blah. You know that. That's another, of the many burdens that African Americans carry.
And I say to those white people, be careful, because there are Asians who outscore your kids by triple. So if it's going to just be on score, on your SATs and on your grades, your kids will be at the bottom of the pile. Because Asians, Europeans, Middle Easterns, Japanese, they really take education seriously in primary and secondary school, and your kids won't have a seat.
Okay, Bill. Bill. I'm sorry, I'm looking at an email from Bill. Okay, Mike, thank you.
Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Margie said something pretty funny here. Margie only writes in the subject line, so there's never anything more than this. This is well beyond tweeting. This is harder than tweeting what she does. She wrote 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in 7 words. I think a very, very much a truism. Margie said, "Our nation is now a reality show." It's pretty much, that's pretty much it. That's why I say, there's something fascinating but terrifying about looking at all of this play out. But it's playing out. Obviously, the Trump stuff, like a reality show, and he's dragged us all into it. I want to just say something about something local that I haven't brought up, but I feel very strongly about. And this has to do with my East End, which is undergoing a transformation that is startling in its... I'll tell you something. There's sometimes when you, especially at night, if you're like driving and you turn a corner and you see an entire landscape in front of you, an urban landscape, that wasn't there last year. Like big buildings and stuff, and you think, wait a minute, where the hell am I? Where you really, sometimes it's almost disorienting. There is an old building in the East End. And it's the Hunt Armory. And that is now, in its future, is in the hands of the URA. It is a historic landmark. It's that almost block-long, huge building. If you don't know the East End, you probably haven't ever seen it because it's not on a main street. And the Hunt Armory, there are people appealing to the Urban Redevelopment Authority to put some retail in there and apartments. And East Enders are unanimously, if somebody would bother to ask East Enders, we are unanimously opposed to another effing apartment building. We're sick of all this. And someone else has come up with such a great idea. And that idea is make it into an indoor ice rink with walking tracks also for indoor, people in the winter to get some exercise. So a community-centered place. There is not one indoor ice rink in the city of Pittsburgh, believe it or not. I mean, if these developers have their way, they'll destroy everything. They will friggin' destroy the place. I happened to go down it was Denniston Street, for anybody who knows it, but where it dead ends. And it dead ends now at a point where if you look off to your right, what you used to see is Reisenstein, the back of Reisenstein School. And now, I'd never seen this back view. There are these two massive, and ugly as holy hell, big, huge, rectangular boxes. Two huge buildings. Apartments. And these apartments are pricey apartments. It's ugly. It's so ugly. I can't take it anymore. I really can't. The ugly crap on the bus. Oh my God, stop them! Unbelievable. Every East Ender needs to contact the URA or to get to Dan Gilman, who I think is the councilman for them, and say, this cannot stand. It cannot let Walnut Capital get their hands, and that's who it is, on another building. You just can't. Why do people think that all development is somehow progress? That this is good? I live in that neighborhood. I walk in that neighborhood. And I was happy to see some life coming back in commercial ways and this and that. But my God, these greedy developers with not 1 cent of giving to the community something that could stand. All of those buildings, every single one of them, are immemorable. There is nothing that will be pointed out as, look at that. Ugly, tacky, and they won't stop. Every time you turn, I'm telling you, there's another one going up. Progress. All right. Well, I just had to get that off my chest. So I went into my refrigerator last night, and there was a yogurt there, and it had been there for a while, so I looked at the thing. I thought, oh, let's see, let me find the date on it. And I was happy to see that the date was December 20-something of this year. So I dove right in and ate it up. If the date, let's say the date had been December 5th, Would I have eaten it? No. I wouldn't have. And I'd be an idiot. I'd throw out perfectly good food because we don't understand what those dates mean. They don't mean this is bad after this date. Those dates mean they are on the decline of their peak from that date on. The sell-by thing you might see in the meat counter, sell-by, that has nothing to do with you. That is for the store itself to know about stocking and restocking. So it's about peak freshness. That's what those dates are. And we don't realize it. The psychological impact of seeing a date that looks like, this thing is out of date, and if I eat it, I'm going to die. That's how we react. And Americans throw out 30 to 40% of the food we buy. We toss. Anyway, Wall Street Journal had a story the other way. Don't toss out that milk, dear. So if you have people in the house that are, arguing. I mean, there's a guy quoted in here who says, I just do the smell test. Or even, God forbid, the taste test, whatever. A best by this date or a use by this date is the manufacturer's recommendation of the last day when a product can be eaten at peak quality. So if you buy a bag thing of lettuce and it's past that date, but it looks okay, and you open it up and it ain't slimy and it ain't brown, still okay, good to go. Throw some dressing on it. Feed it to your guests. They won't know. You won't kill them. That's it. You won't kill them. Waterworks Road and how does who does Walnut Capital know in the URA? Oh, they. Are you kidding? I'm not sure what the current makeup of the URA is, but you can be assured, this is a question from Margie, you can be assured that half of the URA is that Walnut Capital. I mean, if these guys have Christmas parties, they're all drinking eggnog together. You can bet. You can bet. Strangely, the guy, and I was so flipped out to see this. One person on the URA is former state senator Jim Furlow, who, when I first came to Pittsburgh, was a bomb-throwing, lefty troublemaker. He was getting arrested every 2 minutes. Then he got on the city council. He was still trouble. I mean, he's a good guy. He's fought a lot of good fights. But he's the one who is touting Walnut Capitals and not the. And for Jim Furlow to be doing that is mind-boggling to me. I know some of the people who are the principals in Walnut Capital. I know them. They are nice people. But they know one thing. They're developers. And for them, this is what they do. And they are like pigs in you-know-what right now because, man, it's like anything goes. I mean, and they're putting up stuff left and right. They must be making so much money right now. It's unbelievable. But that's what they do. That's their business. They don't see their business as putting up iconic buildings. They don't see their business as even putting up buildings that will not only stand the test of time, but that will stand for more than 3 decades without coming down. It's just not the business they're in. But that's where things like the URA and city regulatory agencies and zoning boards, that's where they come in. They're supposed to be looking after us, the greater community. And I don't think they are. All right. We're done. Thank you very much. Tune in tomorrow because Jean Marie is always a lot of fun to have, and this concussion stuff is the talk of the town. Oh, yeah. Okay? See you in 23.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.